That was good. Hey, everybody.
There we go.
There.
Hey, Dr. Nick.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, Dr. Nick.
Welcome to episode 218.
18.
218 episodes deep into this uncanny universe, multiverse. If you watch the Zack Snyder cut of this uncanny earth, it's 40 hours.
Yeah, only like 3/4 of it's in grayscale.
And somewhere Batman's fighting Joker. Hey, Leah. Leah's here. Hello. We're just talking about the talking.
Talking about the topics that we talk about.
Today, we're going to teach you how to make egg fried rice.
And we're going to solicit some opinions from famous people.
From famous individuals. So what's going on? As you guys saw last night, me and Spider tore the house down on the Uncanny Spirits Club when we tried the clown whiskey. 2 different types. The clear one, which was awful, and the bullet bourbon, which was also not as good.
Well, the bullet itself was good, but the brown bullet made moonshine. I think that's probably confusing because there's 2 bullets we referred to in the episode.
Yeah.
The bullet brand and then the bullet piece of wood that we put
That's
in
what we referred to yesterday. So
no, that was all right. That was decent.
That was good. I haven't touched it, but there it is. So.
Well, considering how low that bottle is, it's probably a good idea. Give that a day or so.
Not even that. Probably like a week or so.
That on top of the shine was probably a bit much for that episode, but it was episode 50.
Listen, we didn't drink that much of the shine though, which was
no,
good.
not really. And I haven't had any since I brought it home either because it's a good suggestion to let the other one age for a lot longer.
Yeah,
maybe like 3 months at least, and see how that goes and see how that experiment progresses because I think it's got potential. I think potentially that might turn into something that'd be worth drinking eventually.
Eventually, maybe in like 6 months to a year.
Mm-hmm.
And then that'll do that. But yeah. So what's going on, everybody? How's everybody's weekend shaping up? Is everybody gonna have a good weekend? Y'all gonna do anything extra spectacular, spontaneous, fun, anything? Me, probably not because it's cold. It's gonna be 29 tomorrow, so it's not gonna be good.
Yeah.
Going out and doing stuff weather.
Yeah, definitely gonna be cold. I know for myself, I'll have some more Spirits Club videos stacked up. The next one isn't going to go through it until beginning of February because I did it ahead of time and I didn't know when we were going to hang out to do the 50th episode. But I'll have some more stacked up in the wings, and so that'll be something to look forward to for people who are into that kind of thing.
Yes, who are into the drinking and destroying your liver, which we did quite nicely yesterday, I think. So, but yes, that's what's going on. Nothing really going on here. It's cold. It's really nothing to do when it's cold outside. 29 in Ohio is pretty cold. Plus, it's like the middle of January, so it's not like everybody's running out to do things. So.
Ohio's not really well known to be a party state in the winter for any reason. I don't know if it's well known to be a party state any other time of the rest of the year, but less so.
Maybe if you go to Puddin' Bay and up by the lakes and all that, get drunk and sunburnt.
Yeah. Stop by at Cedar Point and have yourself a roller coaster or two.
Maybe get motion sickness from it. So, and that's the thing. Like, none of you like Cedar Point because I've tried to get so many people to go, and they're like, "I don't want to go. I get sick." Oh, here comes. Bless you.
Ooh, yeah, you could see it in the face. I was just like,
You
how long
did.
is it gonna take? Yeah, I don't do most stuff like that because it makes my stomach like turn all over the place.
I haven't been to a roller coaster. I haven't rode a roller coaster in probably 12 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't enjoy doing things when it's cold either. I like to lay in bed and catch up on shows or play video games when it's cold. That's about the gist of what I like to do when it's cold outside. That's about it. Ain't really nothing to do. What you gonna do? Just freeze? Go outside, stand around, look at the gray sky. Everything's muddy and slushy, and
Especially when there's not a whole lot of snow either. Like there's no like the amount of snow is so small that you can't like do anything with it. You can't like take your kids sled riding. You can't can't build a snowman. You can't go throw snowballs. You can't do nothing because the snow is just it's too cold for real snow. Even it's just.
but it's warm enough to where everything's still slushy and messy.
Yeah.
So it's not cold enough for it to freeze all the way, but it's warm enough for it to be a muddy, slushy mess, which is my driveway at this point. So I know that doesn't sound very uncanny, does it? It's more canny than anything else. But once the weather starts getting back to nice again, we'll be back to doing what we're going to do and getting some things knocked out. So,
Just a reminder, too, that next week you won't be here, right?
I will not. I will not be here.
So I will be here by myself doing something. I mean, it's always kind of up in the air what I'm going to talk about or what I'm going to do for a solo episode. So we'll figure it out when we get here. Just if anybody wants to tune in and have a good time, or be bored out of your skull, because maybe I'll pick something that's absolutely like, I don't know. I can see the future in these peeling paint on my ceiling.
Just don't.
Let's take a look at it
and then eat it.
No, don't do that. That might be an Ohio thing too, but let's not.
You should eat it. It's good for your system.
Yes.
So that's what's going on. So yeah, make sure you guys tune in for this Uncanny Earth because it'll still be live. I just won't be there. You might see me pop up in the chat though, being just goofing.
Yeah, we'll have something to do. I mean, we'll have some kind of discussion.
Maybe it'd be kind of cool. I don't know. So yeah, that's what's going on with us next week. We got everything in the works still. I'm just waiting for things to kind of warm up, to be honest. There's a couple things I still want to do in regards to the documentaries we're working on. I'd like to get a little bit of more footage of Rogues Hollow because it looks different in the wintertime than it does in the spring and summertime. So I would definitely like to get that kind of knocked out of the way. So that'll probably be soon. I just need it to be, I need a good couple days where the ground's frozen so I don't get my shoes muddy. So I do need a couple days of like just real solid cold weather.
And some good packed snow, some actual packed snow to cover up that mess.
Because it is a mess. And like the trails there are kind of muddy if you're not careful. So you got to be kind of, because it's right by the river and everything else. So, but yeah, that's what's coming on the pipes. We'll be getting out to more expeditions and things once it stops being so cold. Like we said, it's hard to do stuff in the wintertime because there's not a lot of places that are easily accessible when it's cold. So, but there's that. You got anything?
Other than what we just talked about, not really. I mean, we're still going to be doing various we'll be doing the various Twitch stuff for anybody that follows that. We've got more, different stuff in the Spirits Club in the near future. We've got who knows? We kind of talked about some things yesterday, not to get any like super serious or to let anybody in on some of our private thoughts at all. But we're kind of throwing some stuff around to kind of try to revitalize like the show itself and kind of just get some more buzz going. So who knows? You might see some surprises show up depending on if inspiration strikes, and you might see some stuff change on the show. Like we might be getting new intros, we might be getting a proper outro, that kind of thing.
It'd be nice.
And this is just a call out to anybody who's semi-professional in that kind of work. Reach out to us if you'd like to show us your skills, because I've been doing it since we started, and it's probably about time I kind of like move aside and let somebody else do it. You know, because my style is kind of getting a little old for the show, and we both kind of think it's time to get some fresh stuff in there. So, new theme song, new intro stuff, you know, that kind of thing. And so, anybody who's got those kind of skills, if you want to take a crack at it, let us know.
Please. And that goes for any artwork you want to do for the show, or any music, anything of that nature. So feel free to reach out to either one of us. You can find us on the official Facebook. You can also find us on the YouTube channel, and just leave a little message, and then we'll get back to you with the details on how to make this happen. And you will be compensated for your time. So it's like we're asking for handouts, and as long
donations or anything like that.
So yeah, no, we're not going to be doing any more heavy metal.
No heavy metal bumper.
Yeah, that too. No heavy metal blubber burp.
Yeah, we don't want it to sound like that. We want it to sound clear,
right,
and enunciated.
It's professionalism. So
that's right.
But yeah, so tonight we are talking about. I see that the title there is "Nature versus Pharmaceuticals." I know a lot of times, a lot of people will, say like, because I get headaches, like I get bad headaches from time to time, and the only thing that helps is aspirin. So I usually just take a couple aspirin, and about 20 minutes it goes away. But other people that we have talked to had said like just apply pressure at a certain point on your hand, and your headache will go away. I don't necessarily believe that. I'm not gonna say they're wrong, but it never worked for me when I tried it.
I think some of it, a lot of old remedies from years and years ago, like from 50, 100 years ago and things, I think there was a lot more belief. I mean, there was a lot more spiritualism and that kind of thing. And I feel like that led to a lot of things that didn't practically work, but did work in kind of a placebo kind of way, because you expected them to work and you believed that they worked. Just like, power of prayer, that kind of thing. Not to say that power of prayer isn't a real thing, or
Right.
that, religion isn't a real thing, just, perspective wise. Because we've talked about that in the past too. We've talked about collective belief of a lot of people working towards a goal. And this is kind of the same, I feel like. I like some of the stuff that people used to take back in the day, like, I'm surprised the previous generations here in the United States or in the UK are still alive at all, because of
it's true.
The morphine injections for minor things,
Yeah.
the cocaine in your Coca-Cola,
Yeah.
like all this stuff that people would take like just regularly for anything, and they're still alive because they believed it was going to help them, maybe, and they didn't really believe it was going to hurt them, even though maybe it did. But maybe it was their belief that prevented them from suffering worse than they would have otherwise.
Dr. So-and-so's miracle cure elixir that had like morphine, cannabis, alcohol, cocaine, lithium, all of it. And you're just taking spoonfuls of it at night. I'll tell you what, give me some of that. I'll sleep perfect. I'll be out. But I mean, that's what they used to do. And then they have like, they have other recipes and things like that of like dandelion roots, and this is good for fertility. This is good for virility. And a lot of it worked during those time frames, and then nowadays, I think you have people that are more, it's more on the synthetic side. So a lot of people's bodies can't handle the synthetic aspect of it. And so a lot of the natural pain remedies did work, but as the modern medicine, came into its own, I feel like some of the modern stuff worked a lot better. Like penicillin, for instance, you had I had a little sickness a while back, got some penicillin, right as rain. You know, if this would have been, 100, 200 years ago, I could have died, So I think there's good and bads with the whole
Yeah,
pharmaceutical industry.
and we kind of have a modern version of that still happening today. Like we've got a lot of drugs and stuff out there that's all chemicals and whatnot, and then you have the other camp. I hear it all the time from a lot of people that stuff like marijuana is like actually a wonder drug and it can cure and repair so many things. And I think some people take that a little too extreme. I'm sure probably it does have a lot of benefits. Like any plant that will help you has benefits. But as far as like curing cancer and doing this and doing that, I don't know. I'm still kind of like uncertain about that kind of miraculous stuff based on one plant versus other things. But at the same time, I don't really like the modern actual treatments, like the radiation therapy and
Hmm.
the chemo and all that, because that stuff's rough. That
Oh
stuff's
yeah.
pretty bad.
Oh
So
yeah.
I'm sure there's something in the middle there that's pretty truthful compared to the extremes on both ends.
And that's the thing too, like with things like marijuana and such, it's all like, yeah, this will cure everything. I mean, it might help with a lot of things like rheumatoid
Mhm.
arthritis, joint pain, things like that. But it can't help everything. Um, Also, psychedelics.
Mhm.
Psychedelics and microdosing is apparently a good way to write your brain chemicals if you're bipolar or if you're depressed or if you have, something of that nature going on in your head. Supposedly, microdosing like LSD or mushrooms is supposedly good for your brain to sort of
Yeah,
write the chemicals that are off inside of your mental space.
yeah, and that's getting to be a big enough theory now that there's some legitimate studies going on in that area. Now, I say legitimate as in people are actually looking into it for the first time from a scientific perspective, like from governments and things, but also I, whether it's actually legitimate and they won't just mass market something and use it for something, who knows? But at least people are kind of giving it a chance and giving it a look see. Um, because who knows? There's all kinds of hidden benefits to these kind of things. There's, like penicillin is basically from a mold.
Hmm.
It's from a fungus, and most funguses and most molds and spores are bad for you. Like you get the black mold that develops in houses sometimes due to moisture and whatnot, and that'll kill people. And then you have like we use funguses to make cheese and all kinds of other
Hmm.
things. We eat mushrooms like just for cooking, regardless of the drug stuff. But there's a lot of other ones that are super helpful, like penicillin. And so
Yeah.
I think it's good to look at all these natural things with a pretty critical scientific approach to at least like say, hey, you know what? Maybe there is something to this. We'll find out
Yeah.
what it is, you know. And I don't think enough of that is being done anymore. I think a lot of that's being phased out in favor of, oh, we've had these chemicals for a while that seem to do this, they cause a direct this, and then the next day when they're pushing whatever it is on the commercials, at least it's like 12,000 side effects that all
Yeah.
sound pretty horrible. So
Well, there's been a couple that I can remember seeing commercials for years ago, 10, 15 years ago. And now, like, 7, 8 years later after that, it's like, hey, did your family take Lipitor for cholesterol and
yeah.
their heart exploded or, their veins collapsed? You could be
Mhm.
entitled to compensation, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because they don't know and they're not liable. They're not actually held liable for if things like go wrong, I guess, with like the vaccines and stuff. Um, your right to or your right to sue them is waived because you're
Mhm.
taking it. And I don't know. I don't think that's a good thing. I think that companies should be held liable
Yeah. Yeah.
because everybody's physiology is different. Everybody's chemical makeup is different. Yes, we're all human beings, and yes, we're all pretty much the same. We all have 2 arms, 2 legs, 10 fingers, 10 toes, 2 eyes, nose, mouth, all that. But the DNA aspect of it is a lot different than
Mhm.
we talk about, I think.
And that's a good point too, because now that we're getting into a new area of drugs and things, especially like with the last couple years, and again, we don't get into the hot button stuff, so we're not gonna, get into all the ethical stuff about whether you should take something or not.
Right.
But they've got this new the mRNA technology that's supposed to like it's not supposed to alter your DNA, which is interesting because that's what RNA does. RNA is responsible for making sure your genetic code works the way it's supposed to.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm not saying that if you take the vaccine, it's going to do bad things to you. I'm not going to say one way or the other. I'm not going to say it's going to do good or bad things for you.
Right.
That's your personal choice. But as far as grade school science class goes, RNA was a very specific thing. And now you have medicines that are directly interacting with that. And I don't know, that puts me on edge a little bit. I feel kind of like, I don't know. I think we're getting into something that maybe you should have spent more time on. Maybe you should kind of investigate that a little bit more before people start doing it in mass quantities. I could be wrong. I could be wrong. And I don't want to make people think that I'm being an alarmist about it, but it's a new area. And anything that messes with your genetics is kind of we're not as smart as we think we are.
Right. Well, I mean, we can go along the lines of we did a show. I want to say like 2 years ago. One of my favorite episodes actually was biomedical engineering, where he talked about they have nanotechnology that aids in joints, and they can grow your bone in a lab and put it in your body, and that your body won't reject it. You can grow your organs, your kidneys, your livers in a lab based off of your DNA structure, so that your body won't reject it or recognize it as one of its own. And to me, I think that's fascinating. I know that the ethical ramifications for that were quite high, because then there's priorities: who gets saved, who doesn't get saved. I mean, that goes on today with people who need organs, who need a liver transplant. If you're a raging alcoholic and you burned out your liver, chances are you're not going to be at the top of the list, as opposed to somebody who gets into a car accident and they get a shot at that because they need one. So it's definitely, excuse me, I could definitely see something more along the lines of a growing them in a lab and like maybe keeping your organs in case you need them. But my whole thing is, we are basically trying to prolong our lifespan, right? But our infrastructure isn't in place for us to live 150, 200 years. It's put in place for us to live 70 to 100 years if we're lucky on the end of that spectrum, and that's it. Our infrastructure isn't in place. Our medical facilities aren't in place. And you have to wonder too, would you want to live that long? Would you want to live 200, 300, maybe 500 years? Would you want to live that long? Because let's be honest, it would change a lot of factors economically for us. You would definitely have people be like, well, yeah, now my work week, I'm not going to be able to retire until I'm 350 years old. You know what I mean? Because they've prolonged it so much. So it's just something to think about when it comes to anything that has to deal with medical ethics, because at some point we have to die. We can't. I think it's kind of selfish to want to live forever, and I don't necessarily know if I would want to live forever. I at some point, and that's a deep discussion to have. Is, do you want to live forever? If you had the opportunity, would you as a person want to live forever? And I mean, that would be like you would see your kids come and go. You would see spouses, multiple spouses, because if you live forever, you're going to marry a couple times over. They're going to come and go, right? And I think that you'd have to have money saved up. You had to have a big amount of money, and you have to hide it. Couldn't tell anybody. You'd be like, yeah, man, I'll live forever. It's fine, and it just doesn't work like that.
And the thing about that too is we think about it in individual terms, like individual people living for long lengths of time, rather than mass quantities of people. But what you said about infrastructure it rings pretty true, because we've got about 8 billion people in the world right now.
Yeah.
And that's increasing. Now you got to think about, what if we kept the same rate of reproductive habits over the world, but the older generations didn't disappear as quickly as they do now? Right. In which case, now you've got stacks and stacks and stacks of generations coming after. And if you have the older ones and they're still fit to work and they're still fit to do this and they're still fit to do that, then there's jobs aren't opening up, food's not opening up. There's like you can't take care of that many people. That many people can't work for a living.
All right.
You can't reasonably sustain a civilization of that many people if some of them don't go away periodically. Even now we're having a hard time keeping like supporting all the people we have on the planet because of a higher quality of life than we might have had 40, 50, 100 years ago. And so just long term, like civilization basically could collapse because the older generation just doesn't die out. And that's a legitimate fear. And at the other hand, though, if you try to preserve something like that so the older generations keep on going, then they might push down the younger ones and the younger ones die off sooner. So then there's less innovation, there's less like new ideas, there's less creativity and things like that. So it's like a spiral of just stagnation.
Right. Right. Not to mention that, if the population increases how it has been and babies are born more, because now you're going to have an older generation that could
Mm-hmm.
still potentially procreate.
Mm-hmm.
I remember, I think it was Connie Chung. She was an old like newscaster
CNN,
person. Yeah.
from CNN.
I
Yep.
think she had a baby at like 70. So like,
Yeah, I can't even imagine. Like, I
yeah,
already think about like my kid when she's gonna be 18. I'm gonna be about 50,
roughly, yeah.
and that's like I don't know if that's good or bad. Like I feel like I'm gonna be like way out of touch with what she's gonna need at that age.
But remember though, we had kings in different parts of the world in the ancient times. They were like in their 60s and having, intercourse with females in their 20s and 30s and still having kids, like still
Mm-hmm.
having a copious amount of kids. But then again, they were kings, so they didn't have to watch those kids. They just threw them off to the handmaidens or
Mm-hmm.
whoever. But like I said, if the older generation is living longer, maybe they're disappointed in their children. So like, hey, I'm still pretty spry and young. I can have another one, right? Now you're almost doubling that. Then the youth, who knows what practices they'll want to put in place, and then there's going to be a form of ageism that's going to crop up at some
Mm-hmm.
point with different. I mean, we have it now. We have the youth don't care for the older generation don't care for the youth. And I think that's something that's always kind of like just been around. But I think with them not dying off, that's gonna really put that sort of um, that animosity
Mm-hmm.
between those two groups, the old and the young. And everybody who's middle aged gets stuck in the middle of the fight between the two,
Yeah.
because if you look at us, like we're both middle aged, me and my co-host,
Mm.
and we're like in the middle of the youth that wants one thing, right, and the older generation that doesn't want that thing, and they want this thing, and the youth doesn't want that thing, and neither of them are really right because they're relying on extremes, and you can't really rely on extremes. You have to sit down and find a middle ground between the 2 points and plot your destination that way. Because a lot of times the middle between the middle is where the most logical facts and opinions lie. Because you're young, you get full of whatever you get full of. You get, really, uh, you become almost a zealot in the things you believe, right? Because it's like this, that, and this is what I believe, and this is how it has to be, and we're gonna make that change, and you want to make that change, but then the older generation's like, I don't want to change. We're not gonna change. No change. So you're consistently butting heads with the I want to change everything, and the older is like, I don't want to change anything. And then you have people in the middle. It's like, well, we should change some things, but we shouldn't. We should, don't. If it isn't broke, don't fix it. You know. And I think that being in that middle group is the best for us.
Mm.
Because we see that, hey, maybe this thing should go away. Like, you used to be able to smoke in restaurants and airports and hospitals and on planes. I remember when you could still smoke in restaurants. I remember that.
Oh yeah, that was like that was still the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
like it was still pretty common. Like you'd go to McDonald's and there'd be ashtrays on every little table and everything, with all like the thick styrofoam
Yeah.
containers for everything.
And that color brown that
Yep.
was everywhere. That 80s, 90s colored brown that was just saturated everywhere. And yeah, you could smoke everywhere. And then as time progressed, there's less and less places you could smoke at, which I think is good. You don't want to breathe in that secondhand smoke. Because I remember like I said, going in restaurants and you could smell it.
Mm-hmm.
Because they would have smoking or non-smoking. You
Yeah.
get to pick. And
There really is no non-smoking and something like that, because it'll find a way to get over like those little walls and stuff. And now you have even further, like, people are crazy about it. Like, people get to the point where, oh, you want to smoke? Oh, it's not your choice at all anymore. Now, New Zealand, you can't, like, it's completely banned. Like, we're banning all tobacco as of this point, and you can't buy it, you can't get it, you can't nothing. And so in places like that, it's not going to exist in the Generation 2 unless it goes underground, which I don't see. It's kind of an old world kind of thing.
Yeah, I agree.
Like cigarettes and things. I know still a lot of people that smoke, but it's like, it's no longer what it was. I think its time as a big societal thing is probably past for the most part. Yeah, and I don't mean to say it's going to go away overnight, but I think in the next like 30, 40 years, the number of people who smoke like that, like, it's going to be so negligible. I mean, people are probably still going to smoke like marijuana, or they'll smoke whatever else, because that stuff's going to be legal probably nationwide soon, I imagine. Yeah, but I think tobacco days are largely on the decline, and I think they're behind us.
Yeah, because you don't see cigarette commercials. I don't think I've ever seen one.
Not in a long time.
Not a long time. I don't think I've ever seen one. No, they used to have for radio commercials and stuff. No,
like, I think they got like
somehow. Yes, there's a thing like they can't show them on TV or something.
Yeah, not even like alcohol. You can still do alcohol commercials after a certain time because they figure the kids are in bed and stuff.
Right.
But even that is less. Like, that's moved on to social media.
Oh yeah.
You don't see anything with smoking anymore. No, you don't see it on TV. You don't see it on social media. Like, people don't advertise cigarettes. I used to see, like, maybe 10 years ago, maybe a little bit farther back, you used to see commercials online for those, like, not like chewing tobacco, but those pouches that had chewing tobacco in them. And they're like, oh, it's a safer alternative because you're not actually making contact. It's just the juices and stuff. And it's like, okay, whatever. And now you don't see that anymore either. Like, all those other things, you don't see anything for smoking patches.
No.
And that'll tell you a big, like, thing. Like, they don't even show you, like, the treatments so much anymore because you don't need it.
Well, and then everybody kind of switched over to vaping, which didn't really help things much.
Nah.
They just took one. You're just substituting one way of doing it for another. And it's like, I mean, like I said, the older generations, they're still going to smoke, but a lot of the newer ones, they just don't do it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just not big.
Will it go away at some point? I don't know. I don't think so. I don't, as long as like places like Southeast Asia, the Middle East, South America, Latin America, places where smoking isn't considered to be as like strict as it is here, I don't think you're ever going to see it go away. I think you might see a generation that doesn't do it, but I don't ever think that it's just going to be gone permanently. I don't see that happening.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? Maybe it'll go full circle and go back to the time where just people have their pipes, and it's just like a distinguished like thing people do when they don't even like inhale it. Really, they just puff on it just for the taste and whatnot.
Well, people still like to go to hookah bars, which is really weird to me because they're like rocks almost.
Cigar clubs and stuff. Like, people go to cigar clubs still, and they'll all sit in a big circle, have big cigars, and the air is so hazy and thick.
Right.
But not too much of that anymore, except for a few places.
But yeah, it's and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. I think the more that, but I also, on the same token, don't think that it's going to come back like with marijuana and people smoking in restaurants, and I don't think that's ever going to come back.
No. No, it's still going to be something where if you want to smoke anything, you got to do it in your own home or maybe like
Yeah.
out in a place where it's so wide open that there's no chance it's just going to waft everywhere. Which even then, like public parks, a lot of times are like, no, can't smoke here, can't do that. It just depends on what state you're in,
Yeah.
and that'll probably continue. That'll probably continue.
Yeah. Yeah. States' rights, the ability to
Mhm.
control their own laws and rules. I think that's gonna be it. But like I said, hospitals. I mean, could you
Yeah,
imagine just being in a hospital smoking? People got lung cancer. Damn man.
nurse's desk with the ashtrays and
Yeah,
everything. They're all there in the break rooms and everything. Yeah.
in the hospital, man. Of all places, a hospital or an airplane. Imagine
Yeah.
flying like in an airplane where it's pressurized air. Like you are 100% breathing in that cigarette smoke. 100%. So it's like it's very weird how our society has changed from when we were kids to now. Even
Mhm.
the things that we could get away with, you can't get away with them anymore. You can't do kids aren't making sweet ramps to jump their sweet bikes anymore. Everybody's on social media or they're playing video games or they're watching some streamer play
Mhm.
games. And as to where we were, I mean, we were outside all the time. I was outside all the time. I wasn't really in the house much. So it's different. And I think there's going to be more changes. But I think, like, circling back to the point of older generations, I think that prolonging life is kind of a double-edged sword. On one hand, yeah, you're alive, you can still be with your family. But on the other hand, you're alive and you're draining resources. I mean, so what do you do? Do you Logan's run it? Once you hit 30, your little chip bleeps and then you're deleted. It's something like that.
Yeah, and I don't have a good I don't have a good moral argument for it either way too.
Same.
I don't feel like going partial genocide is a good idea, but I also don't think like extending things to the point where nobody has to ever worry about anything is kind of bad unless you build a system where people will automatically once you hit a certain age you're out of the job market but you're somewhat taken care of.
Right.
And even that's difficult though because then you have to pay to support that, so you have to figure out if you're going to raise taxes and who's going to do the taxes. Is it going to be the people who came after you and they're going to be mad because they're constantly taking care of you instead of taking them themselves, but when they get to your age they'll be able to do the same thing. So but it's just people don't want to wait. People don't want to wait that long. I don't want to wait till I'm old. I want to stop taking care of you. I want to take care of myself
Right.
and that kind of thing. And I get that. I get that. And so there's no real good answer to that. I mean, it's difficult from whatever angle you look at it.
Yeah, you're not. I don't think there's an easy way to fix that process. I think the only way to truly actually be able to sustain that sort of a thing is to get on that ship and head to Mars or head to wherever other planet we're going to try to colonize it, because
Mhm.
I don't see it being um, as big of an issue, because when they're old they can send them out to another planet and they can live on a different planet, and then the youth live here and then you get shipped out to that planet, and it's a constant to and from.
And really, I think that the future is off in space anyway. I think that's the only way we're going to survive as a species because we're going to keep expanding. Unless some disaster happens to such an extent that it wipes out two-thirds, three-quarters of the population.
Right.
And people talk about that kind of thing happening all the time. Like there's cycles of near extinctions and things, and for years people have been saying it's going to be our turn next. We're going to be the next collapse of civilization or whatnot. But who knows? Maybe we won't. Maybe it'll just keep on slogging along. And I think eventually we're going to have to move out into at least throughout our own solar system somehow, because where else are you going to go? I mean, you're going to run out of space on the planet here. You can't take up every square inch because then you don't got the jungles that produce things that we need. You don't got the farmland. You don't got any of that kind of stuff because there's people living everywhere. So,
You're stuck
you
eating
know,
McDonald's and that weird mystery meat.
yeah, yeah, they got to grow it all in labs and everything, and
Yeah.
that's it. So, we eventually we have to go out into space, really, and we have to live someplace else.
If we don't, it's just going to be another extinction level event that's going to happen that will reset, um, as in many folklore tales, religious stuff. It's all in cycles. So it's like either we do that, or I think the Earth reworks itself, wipes out most of the population. There's maybe, a million people left, and they have to start the thing up again. You know, if you
Yeah.
run it down to a million people left on the planet, it would definitely be a lot different, be a lot more spacious.
Mm.
So you would just have to probably learn how to survive, because your nuclear facilities and stuff, they're not going to have the people that need to man it. So once those go bad, there's going to be meltdowns,
Mm.
and then you're going to have radiation poisoning. If you're not taking care of your electrical needs, those are going to get, overran. And it's just, you need those kind of things in place and the people here to man it. But at the same time, you don't want too many people on the planet to absolutely, void every resource that we have.
And that kind of reminds me of a point too. And it's something that's only recently changed. I believe that they don't have the restriction anymore because they want to get more people like living in certain places. But China had that rule for the longest time where you could only have like one child,
Mhm.
and it had to be what? Like it had to be a boy.
Yeah.
And certain families, every once in a while, they'd say, okay, you're allowed to have one girl over this generation, and that's it. And then anything else, and they'd take them, and you can't have them, and then they just disappear, gone. And you know what happens after that, because they're
Right.
keeping the population down. But it didn't seem to work because their population in the cities kept exploding, getting bigger
Yeah.
and bigger and bigger, no matter what. So I think that they've abandoned that. I don't know how recent it's been though. I remember reading about it that they were abandoning the one child rule. So it happened in my lifetime at some point. I just don't remember when. But that's an example of something that they tried to control their population in a pretty extreme way, and it didn't work.
At all.
So when we're looking at things like that, be like, okay, well, let's just trim this bunch of people. Let's just, cull this bunch of people. Let's just do this in a callous way. It's not going to work. It seems on the surface like, oh yeah, that'll be perfect, but it's not going to work because people get around things, people reproduce. That's just how it's going to go.
And who's to say like who has to go and who doesn't? Who gets that say?
That too.
We start killing off the older generation. Well, then what? Is just going to keep being that cycle where the younger generation keeps killing off the older generation. Well, then that's just going to build the animosity that's needed. And then the younger generation is going to start getting killed off. And it's just going to be a battle. Is really what it's going to be. I mean, we already have that kind of a situation now between the youth of America and the older generations. I mean, it's even more divisive than it was 20, 30 years ago,
People are seeing this especially here in the United States with our government right now, because we're looking at it really close, that all of a sudden people are waking up to the fact that, you know what, the people who are in charge in the Capitol are on average like 60, 70, 80 years old, and they're making their decisions based on their experiences.
Yes.
And they've lived so long that they might not see things the way everybody else does. They might not understand the world the way everybody else is. And that opens the door for super young people to come in and be like, we're going to be progressive. We're going to change all this stuff. And then they come up with ideas that are kind of like, no, that's silly. That's not going to work either. Like, you're just looking for something that's so radically different because it's different, not because you know it's going to work, but because it's so radically different that it'll shake things up. Well, I don't want things to be shaken up. I want things to be fixed.
Yes.
And if I had a solution for it, I'd do it myself, but obviously I don't. But I know both you guys are wrong.
Right. Like, the older generation is just as wrong as the younger ones. The younger ones, they don't have the intelligence. And I shouldn't say they don't have the wisdom.
The life skills.
They don't have the wisdom. They don't have the common sense or the wisdom. So like, they're gung-ho about things that don't matter. and the older generation is trying to keep things that don't matter. And meanwhile, us, we're stuck in the middle of watching these two go at it when we're like, the best way to fix this is to do A and B. While you guys are bickering and arguing, let us jump in and fix it because we know the youth. We also know the older generation. We know how this works. We know how we've been here for a while, you know? And I think that's the problem. You get a lot of these young hotheads that want to go on this world changing crusade, but they haven't done the research, they haven't done the economic scale that it would take to do a lot of these projects. They are not in touch with their neighborhoods, they're not in touch with the people around them. They're just uh you know, they're just overly full of idealism with little to no common sense. But then the older generation, they want to preserve a way of life that can't be preserved anymore because it doesn't exist. You know, the technology has changed and they have had to change with it. And so you have that gap between the two of that misunderstanding aspect. And in order for things to actually work out, you have to have common ground. You have to have that middle person that says, no, you know what? You're just as bad as the other one. You're both wrong, right? This is how we should fix it. But you don't see that because
Mm.
the way the system is rigged is that it's all these old, out of touch people that are in power. And then when you get one of these little spry youngsters in there, they're so crazy because they don't like what the older generation have done. They want to propose the most radically, um, you know, unable to attain ideas that they can. And we've seen that. We've seen some of these younger
Mm.
candidates propose these deals, these green deals, and they don't work. They don't. There's no. They haven't done the research. Economically, it's something that would cost trillions. So it's like you have to look at that and you have to say, okay, let's take these two people here. Let's take what they have, their ideas. Let's put them in the middle with us, the middle-aged folks, and let's break it apart and see what we can put together from those ideas. I think that's the only way to solve it. And I think that like I said, there's certain things I think we need to be more on point with. Biomedical engineering, for one, I would love to see that explode. I would love to see that explode. You know, being able to grow a human leg for somebody that doesn't have a leg. Now they have one. Um, or the ability to give sight to the blind or hearing to the deaf. That fascinates me. I think everybody should have that equal footing, that equal playing field in life. You know, just because you don't have sight in your eyes, I think
Mm.
the ability should be there to get it. You know, and I think that would be awesome, both old and new. But here's the thing, and this is playing up to our point: who gets to decide who gets it, and who's the ones who get it? Is it the rich who get it? Is it the poor who get it? Is it the who gets it? Is it the alcoholic that's still going to continue drinking after he's had his liver regrown 3-4 times? That's what we have to really consider when we're dealing with anything medical, anything beyond they give you a shot and you're done. Anything that's going to prolong life. Because what if the alcoholic gets on the liver and then he ends up getting drunk and kills a family? You know, that's and I know that's a lot of what ifs, but it's like, because I've seen it. I've seen and read cases of alcoholics who have killed families, who have done these things.
And there have been stories, not many, but there have been stories of people who got transplants because they got in some accident or something, and they got a
Right.
transplant that basically let them live their life in like better than they did before, and then they went right back to what they were doing. They caused a problem. Like there's stories of people who got lung transplants from smoking, and then they went back to smoking. And then we're not
Mm-hmm.
talking just like a couple cigarettes. We're talking about packs and packs a day. They
Yeah,
didn't
because they
break
got
their
new
habits. So they
lungs.
do, yeah. And so they just ruined the same thing, and then they ended up passing because of lung cancer because they couldn't go through the whole thing again. You couldn't replace them again because it was too hard on their body. It
Yeah.
was too hard on the system, whatever. And so that kind of thing is a very real thought. And we've already got people on long waiting lists for stuff, like
Yes.
for like kidneys and stuff like that and all that. So there's no good way out of it either. We've come to a point where we can do miraculous things, but we can't decide effectively who deserves it and who doesn't.
And no, you're right. You're right. And I think too, what doesn't help is, we have all these, the Wounded Warrior Project where people, lose their limbs in the military. What happens if those get regrown and then they go back to joining the military again, and then it happens again? What do we do in that situation?
And there's going to be people who say, well, they were out there defending our freedom and doing this and doing that. But then what if they aren't? What if they're involved in like an unjust conflict? Because we've had our fair share and there are still some out there. Like, we're in parts of the world. I don't want to sound not patriotic or not, against military people, because I'm generally pro-military in most circumstances. But there's a lot of places out in the world where we've got people stationed that we don't need to be there.
We don't belong there.
People are getting hurt for interests that aren't ours. Like, people are getting hurt and blown up and whatnot. And if we just didn't send people, they wouldn't get hurt, But that's a whole other discussion.
That's a whole other discussion. But two, what about people who, genuinely like need a new heart?
Mm-hmm.
Actually need a new heart, not the person who's ramping up the McDonald's diet, eating McDonald's 3 times a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and then their heart just goes because they went nuts, right? But there's people that need a new heart.
I have a perfect story about that. This is a true story. I worked some years ago, before I moved out to this part of the state. I worked at a hospital, and I worked in the kitchen. And one of the things I had to do was I would have to deliver dinners to patients and things like that. And a lot of times when you're in a hospital as a patient, you have a pretty restricted diet. It's not often that they're just like, oh, you're just here for whatever. You can eat whatever you like. It's usually, okay, you're having this procedure, or you're having this, or you're sick with this. You got to have very specific things to make sure that they help your body. And we had a guy, I believe he'd had a heart attack or something like that. It was something heart related. And he was on a particular kind of diet. And so when I took his food up to him, he was mad. He was like, I ordered double this and double this and double this, and I want my food. And I'm like, I can't give you that. I can only give you what the doctor ordered for you. I'm sorry. You can call the kitchen and talk to the head person down there if you like. I can't do anything for you. And after I went back down, because he declined the food, like all the food completely, he was just like, I don't want any of it if you're not going to give me what I want. And when I went down there, I was like, this is what happened. They're like, yeah, you didn't do anything wrong. He's just probably going to stop and get like a whole bunch of McDonald's on the way home anyway.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so you guys already know about this dude? They're like, yeah, he's just going to end up offing himself because he won't listen to doctor's orders. He's here because he's got this condition and he won't take care of it. And I was kind of like, okay, so that puts it in perspective, because you can only do so much to try to help somebody be healthy.
Yeah, you're right.
And if they decide that they don't care, that they're like, you know what, I don't care if I'm here because I had a heart attack, I want to eat all this food that caused it anyway, whatever, then people are going to do what people are going to do.
Yeah, you can't force people to change. You can only give them the option, but it starts internally. You have to wake up and be like, man, I want to change. I want to have a better life. I want to do better. You know what I mean? And at one point, like I said, I weighed about 260. I was big boy. But then I just woke up one day and said, I'm going to start taking steps to ensure my survival, my longevity. And I just kept at it. And then I ended up losing like 50, 60 pounds off of that. So it was very, very, very nice, and I haven't bounced. I went up to that at all. So it's all in how much you want it, and how much you're willing to do to attain that goal with anything, how much do you want it? Mm-hmm. If you want it that bad, you're going to do what it takes to attain it, and diet, we could go on a whole nother tirade about diets. Like, that's a whole nother uncanny issue for another uncanny day, So that's really about the gist of it, to be honest with you. I mean,
yeah.
And that's the thing too. A lot of people, the information's out there with food now of what's in it. Like red dyes are bad for you. There's just certain things you're not supposed to eat. So
Yeah.
it's really.
I think that's about
It's really.
I think that's about all we got too.
Yeah, that's about it.
We got about 4 minutes left here. So,
But yeah, what do we got coming up? What do you got coming up?
well, of course, we got next week. Next week is going to be solo. I'll be here by myself doing the Friday show. So we'll figure it out along the way. Don't forget to tune in. If you are not part of our YouTube channel, please like, share, subscribe.
Comment.
It's possible in the near future we may start doing like, hey, this episode isn't going to be on Facebook. It's only going to be on YouTube. So if you're not on YouTube, you won't see it. Just as like a little to make sure you're paying attention.
Yeah.
And it'll be pretty much at random. So make sure you're liked and shared and subscribed, all that good stuff.
Like, share, comment, subscribe.
But
smack that heckin' like button.
This Tuesday, I'll be doing another Twitch Tuesday where I play a game I have never played before. Last time it was Metal Gear Solid 5 with the flaming unicorn and everything, and that was an experience.
I bet.
But do you have any streams coming up? Anything big?
So I got Stranger of Paradise, which is the Final Fantasy 1 prequel. So I'll probably be rocking that. Of course, Elden Ring. I'm rocking Elden Ring heavy. That's really it. I'm looking to get back into something horror though. So I might do something horror themed. Because I like horror stuff in the months of January and February. I don't know why. I just always do. People are always like, what about October and Halloween? I'm like, no, for some reason, January and February. Like, I've seen a lot of really good horror movies in January and February. So, speaking of, I'm going to go see Megan next week. I don't know if you know what that is. It's about the killer robot doll, which looks legit. So I'll be doing that. But yeah, that's it. I ain't got nothing too crazy coming up. Just trying to bide my time until this horrible cold weather leaves. So that's it.
Yeah. So I guess that's all we got. I guess that's all.
There's some toe beans behind you. There it is.
Gonna scratch me in my face probably.
She's like, hey, whoop-cha.
Don't do that.
Anyways, y'all, like we always say, like, comment, share, like, Anyways, you guys, as always, why be boring when you can be uncanny? Spider will see you folks next week.